Alison Sperling. I am a postdoc fellow and iPotty fellow at the Technische Universität in Berlin, Germany, where I am recording this now. First of all, I want to say thank you to the event organizers and for this conference, and to UC Santa Barbara for hosting. Of course, thank you to Nicole Seymour for organizing this panel and for inviting me to tell you all a little bit about this recent project that just came out. Thank you to the other panelists, and thank you to Paradoxa, the journal, and to David Willingham for being willing to, or allowing me to sort of share this project in this public space. So I'm going to introduce you to Climate Fictions. It is a recent 2019-2020 project, an issue of Paradoxa, World Studies in World Literary Genres. The issue is available online now, so I just wanted to start by showing you the website and showing you that you can access the full table of contents here online, including a free version of the introduction and one of the sample artist dialogues, which I will tell you a little bit about in a moment. All of the individual essays and dialogues are available for purchase, as well as the entire book. So I just wanted to direct you there so you knew where to find it. So the project is called Climate Fictions, and it of course builds on quite a bit of scholarship, at least in the last decade or so, on climate fiction as a genre. And what I'm going to do is introduce the issue by reading a little bit here and there from the introduction, and then by showing a couple of examples from the issue. So this is the cover of the issue, which is an image from the Lithuanian Pavilion at the Venice Biennale last year, where I saw this performance called Sun and Sea, which is a kind of ecological libretto, an opera performance of this kind of constructed beach on a swath of sand in a warehouse that was located off-site from the Venice Biennale. So a quick look at the table of contents, and I've highlighted, I don't know that I'll get to all of them, but I am going to try at least to point towards them. This is the table of contents. The issue has 49 contributors. It's made up of 3 sections, simulation, narration, and speculation. And within each section, there are 2 smaller sections. There's the dialogues, as you can see here, and the more traditional academic essays. And the dialogues I curated rather late in the game to try and address certain things that I saw coming up across the, it was an open call, across the papers that had been accepted for publication. And so I found that there were some certain gaps in how we might be thinking about climate fictions, and was hoping that some of the dialogues would attend to them. And in fact, they do in some ways that I will show you shortly. So again, yeah, you can check this out, online in a much more relaxed setting, because I have to move through them rather quickly. So the introduction opens with a discussion of the cover piece, and then introduces cli-fi, which I think most people that will be presenting at the conference here know what this is, but perhaps for those who are new to the idea, it was worth a short introduction. So this issue of Paradoxa follows recent scholarship in the environmental humanities on the literary origins and expressions of climate fiction, at least since the term's arrival on the popular and academic scene. Climate change fiction, cli-fi, or in this introduction also denoted as CF, was coined and since championed, now kind of rather famously policed by blogger Dan Bloom in 2007, and popularized by a retweet from speculative fiction author Margaret Atwood in 2012. Climate fiction has since been the subject of numerous scholarly works, as well as popular and widely read publications in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, and NPR, the latter of which especially inquires after climate fiction's ability to affect real planetary change and how. Climate fictions take many forms, ranging from realism to the science fictional, apocalyptic scenarios to utopian fantasies. The category is notoriously difficult to describe. What must a work have in order to think of it under the banner of climate fiction? What role must climate change or climate science play in a work? And at what scale or temporality must a work operate in order to be considered climate fiction? And these are kind of central questions to the study of climate fiction so far, especially as questions that are directed towards whether or not it is a genre or a mode or an aesthetic or a certain set of qualities. And so these questions really attend to that. but more so just to continue reading, what does it matter outside of publishing and marketing considerations to name a work as climate fiction? Does it charge it with a certain environmental, political potential to enact real change? As J.K. Ulrich asks in The Atlantic, can books save the planet? And later in the introduction, I talk a little bit about what Derek Woods calls the ecological function or possible ecological function of climate fiction. So why pluralize climate fiction into climate fictions? In short, the issue challenges the position that literature, and especially the novel, is the most appropriate form through which to engage climate change. And I say this as myself, a literary scholar, very much invested in the novel. Leading scholars of climate change and Anthropocene fiction have argued that the novel form is distinct in its abilities to capture and confront the complexities of climate change. Matthew Schneider-Meyerson has written that the staggeringly complex problems of the Anthropocene are appropriately represented, deconstructed, and understood through a medium that demands sustained engagement. And this kind of sustained engagement is something that I'm especially interested in as I curated the artist dialogues. Adam Trexler has likewise written that the novel, in comparison to nonfiction, documentaries, or Hollywood films, has a specific formal capacity to interrogate the emotional, aesthetic, and living experience of the Anthropocene, emphasizing the real agency of atmospheric agency in the novel. And Trexler has also worried that a media studies approach to climate texts could turn climate change into a discourse or a series of representations. And this is precisely a kind of thing that I was hoping to maybe challenge in this, or at least provoke in the issue. A simple gesture, pluralizing climate fictions, is thus an attempt to draw attention away from the novel so that we might interrogate its privileged position in the study of climate fiction, as well as to ask what it might mean to think of climate fictions outside of genre. While many of the essays presented here do engage with literature and the novel in ways that will continue to be crucial to the study of climate fictions, others continue to broaden our scope of climate fiction to include film, video games, board games, even climate modeling itself under the banner of Cli-Fi. In addition, the 14 invited dialogues between visual and performance artists, poets, and art activists specifically are thinking the relation between climate and fiction in their poetry, visual art, performance, game design, dance, fiction, experimental film and video, and activism towards climate justice. In part because climate change looms as one of the most pressing urgencies of the contemporary moment, climate fictions demand treatment beyond traditional forms and beyond the ways that academic criticism alone is capable of responding to. The dialogues also attend to what many have identified as a gap in climate fiction and in climate fiction studies of the work of queer, transgender, disabled, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The effects of climate change disproportionately affect these marginalized groups of people, and yet their voices are arguably the least heard and the least referenced in climate fiction studies. So the issue attempts to fill this gap in certain ways, and the first example that I want to share with you is just a short dialogue. All of the dialogues are about 8 pages or so, titled Balance is Possible, a really lovely dialogue between Stina Atterbury and Elizabeth LaPensée. And Beth LaPensée is an award-winning artist who creates and researches Indigenous futurisms in media. And I know Beth's work through a presentation that Stina gave at, I think it was SFRA a few years ago, called a game that Beth has created called Thunderbird Strike. And so I asked if Stina would be willing and if Beth would also be willing, and they were both quite excited to contribute to the project. So thanks to them for that. What I think is important here, I mean, there's 2 things, and for the sake of time, I'll just summarize. The first is that Stina asks and opens this kind of discussion asking about the temporality of climate change, right? Which I think was also inherent in the introduction section that I read. And it's, thinking about the ways in which Indigenous futurisms might resist thinking about the kind of apocalypse that climate change is often thought of, right? For many, the ongoing structures of violence like colonialism have long shown that the violences of climate change are kind of existing along a continuum, and Beth speaks to that in the opening here. But in addition, and this is a really lovely image from Thunderbird Strike, you can see, Stina asks Beth, since this is a contribution to a collection on climate fictions, I wanted to ask if this is a term you feel comfortable with using for your work. And Beth responds, such a sharp observation. I appreciate how indigenous futurisms encapsulates fiction as a tool that can be paired with fact. While climate fictions narrows the focus to thinking of the fictional aspect, indigenous futurisms allow science and fiction to exist in tandem, working together. You can be playful while facing the seriousness of climate crisis. You can laugh as a way to heal from trauma. You can reflect on the past, tell true stories, and imagine futures. Balance is possible, even if right now it is a metaphor reflected in how we generate works. Indigenous futurisms give space for this. To follow up on that, I thought I would turn our attention towards this dialogue between Daniela Naomi Molnar and Walida Emerisha called There Are No Givens. And I hope the essay writers will forgive me for not being able to properly present their work. It's just in the shorter format. Some of the dialogues are quite simpler to present and show examples rather than the really complex arguments present in a lot of the essays. But Walida Emerisha is the co-editor of Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction Stories from Social Justice Movements. And this is just a really lovely conversation that they have, which starts with this conversation about the role of storytelling and story, itself kind of fiction and fabulation and speculation in approaching questions of climate change and climate justice. And Emerisha gives us a great answer about, the kinds of ways that storytelling is crucial to actually climate activism. And Daniela also asks, and I think this is kind of an apt way, and I was wondering if maybe I should conclude with this, but instead I'll point to it now. She asks, I know this word I'm about to use is very complex, especially in the context of climate activism, and I don't use it lightly, but I'm struck by how much hope there is in your works. What is your relationship to hope? And Walida answers, I think hope is absolutely important. And I think my hope and my vision for the future is definitely rooted in realism. We named our collection Octavia's Brood in honor of the science fiction writer Octavia E. Butler, from whom many of us learn the principles and values of what I call visionary fiction. And her work is very realistic, and it's hard. Most of her worlds are worse than ours, and things have continued to get worse for oppressed peoples. But her work says that there will always be the ability to struggle and to change things as long as we root in a shared vision and shared values and principles. Of course, this is much more difficult, much more difficult to do than say. And so I think it's important to recognize that hope is not a frivolous thing. Hope is a heavy thing. Mariama Kamba said, hope is a discipline. Hope is not something we do to escape reality. It is something we do to root in reality and to be able to fundamentally change reality. So this is an essay that I thought I would also share with you by Bogna Konyor, and it's called Modeling Realism, Digital Media, Climate Simulations, and Climate Fictions. And I think whereas all of the examples that I'm showing are invested in thinking about kind of systemic change, fundamental systemic change in different ways, this essay is kind of provocative. It really is asking us to think about the kinds of digital simulations and images that now play a crucial role in defining the so-called real in relation to climate as themselves possibly fictions. Bogna writes, from billion-dollar supercomputers that predict climate change using extremely vast data sets to the flourishing of cultural narratives around it, the epistemic status of no other phenomenon is so hotly disputed. Both on a scientific and cultural level, I will argue, fiction can be understood as prognostication, whether in the form of stories that we tell ourselves to predict the social consequences of climate change, or in the form of complex simulations of the planet used to predict its environmental consequences. And so I think this quite nicely and in unexpected ways ties together the ways in which we think of stories, digital stories, or stories told by climate data, in a way to kind of fictionalize all of climate, or to think about climate as itself a fiction, is of course both dangerous and can lead to things like climate deniers, but is also potentially quite powerful. I thought I would end by pointing to this conversation between MT and Shulia Chang. The title is Uncertain Harvest. I'm just going to go to the beginning so you can see that. And you can see there's also a lot of really beautiful images from Shulia Chang's video works. And this is a conversation that covers a lot of ground. And I thought I would conclude with this question that MT asks, not this one, let me see. Oh, I should also say, the whole issue has all of these kind of hints about the ways in which COVID-19 and it has and the kinds of various forms of confinement that especially the artist dialogues are dealing with, because two people are speaking over Skype, both kind of having been in confinement for various amounts of time. And so I think there's a kind of haunting of the whole issue by COVID-19, and I think that's something that really could be explored more. So MT asks about how SLC is kind of moving between a lot of these different realms, and MT says, yeah, I definitely know many queers of color who feel apprehensive about going into nature and joke that they don't ever do it because they don't want to get killed. Not too many people move so easily between organic farms and queer urban subcultures. Do you ever experience dissonance or friction in that transit? Julia Chang responds, I have put myself into an experiment as a digital nomad so as to traverse these worlds freely. I choose to make science fiction, crafting a genre of new sci-fi queer cinema. But this allows me the possibility of crossing time and space, gender, and genre. I am always reminded of this comment from a collaborating partner who came to see my film IKU at a Cal Arts screening. He left without saying hello and told me that he wasn't quite sure if I was the activist he had previously been working with. I simply cannot worry about this anymore. At the same time, my venture into cooking for my queer dears can also be quite impossible. Somehow the specification of diets, the allergies to navigate. To invite people for a dinner these days involves a survey of dietary situations, and certainly this takes us back to environmental and health issues, to ethical beliefs, body natures, and the demise of immune systems. Food is political, sex is political, being is political. And this conversation here ends with this lovely picture of Shulia Chang at her work at Seeds Underground in London from 2013. So I'll conclude there with this kind of really diverse array of glimpses into the issue, and hope that it points to all sorts of ways that climate fiction expands our notion of understanding the kind of slippage between climate and fiction, climate as itself fiction, and the kinds of roles that storytelling and speculation might play actually in towards climate justice. So thank you so much for listening, and please be in touch with any questions.